At 5 minutes to 8, on the morning of the 19th of June, 1944, the carrier Taiho turned into the wind 500 miles west of Saipan and began launching. 16 Zeros, 17 dive bombers, 9 torpedo planes. Steam vented forward across her flight deck so the helmsman could hold the wind straight down the center line. Across the horizon, from 8 other carriers, the same thing was happening. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa had been waiting 2 years to launch this strike. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, 330 of his 430 carrier aircraft would be gone, along with the 2 best carriers in his fleet. 4 days earlier, on the 15th of June, American troops had landed on Saipan. Saipan sat 1,300 miles from Tokyo, inside the line the Japanese High Command had drawn as its absolute inner defense, and inside the range of the new B-29 bomber. Losing it meant American heavy bombers over the home islands. Admiral Soimu Toyoda activated Operation A-Go the same day and sent out the fleet Japan had been hoarding since 1942 for a single decisive battle. Ozawa brought 9 carriers, 5 battleships, 13 cruisers, and around 430 aircraft. Waiting for him was Task Force 58 under Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, 15 carriers and roughly 900 aircraft, with 7 fast battleships under Vice Admiral Willis Lee formed up 15 miles ahead of the flight decks as a wall of anti-aircraft fire. Above them all was Admiral Raymond Spruance, whose orders from Nimitz were to cover the Saipan landing. Ozawa knew he was outnumbered. His plan turned on 3 things being true. The first was range. His aircraft carried no armor and no self-sealing fuel tanks, which made them light, and light meant reach. A Japanese strike could fly around 300 miles. An American strike could manage 200. Ozawa intended to launch from 100 miles outside the range at which the Americans could hit back. The second was shuttle bombing. His aircraft would strike Task Force 58, fly onto the airfields on Guam, Rota, and Tinian, refuel and rearm there, and hit the Americans again on the way home. The third was the 500 land-based aircraft of Vice Admiral Kakuji Kakuta's first air fleet, based on Tinian. Under A-Go, Kakuta's planes would attack first and destroy a third of the American carrier force before Ozawa's aircraft ever left their decks. By the 19th of June, none of the 3 was true. Between the 11th and the 13th, American fighter sweeps had gone through the Marianas airfields and destroyed Kakuta's air fleet on the ground and in the air. Kakuta did not report it. His signals to Toyoda and to Ozawa claimed American carriers sunk and hundreds of American aircraft destroyed and passed over his own losses. Ozawa sailed toward the Marianas, believing an intact air fleet was waiting to support him and that the enemy had already been bled. His own air crews were the other problem. They were replacements, rebuilt after the veteran carrier pilots of 1941 had been consumed over Guadalcanal, the Solomons, and Rabaul. Since the middle of May, the fleet had been anchored at Tawi-Tawi off Borneo, next to the Tarakan oil fields, where the ships could burn crude straight from the wells. There was no finished airfield there, and American submarines patrolled the approaches, so the air groups barely flew for a month. Interrogated after the war, Ozawa put it plainly. The training, he said, was very insufficient because the airfield at Tawi-Tawi was still under construction. His pilots could land on a carrier in daylight. They could not land on one at night. Almost everything known about what Ozawa believed on those 2 days comes from the interrogation he sat for in 1945 and from the signal logs of a fleet that was already gone. Records like those are what Warshelf is built on, a library of short books on this war, 1 story to a volume, with every source named in the back. The link is in the description. On the 13th of June, the mobile fleet sortied from Tawi-Tawi, and the submarine Redfin watched it go. On the 15th, at 22 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, a lookout aboard the submarine, Flying Fish, saw the fleet coming out of San Bernardino Strait. That report told Spruance the battle was coming. On the night of the 18th, Ozawa broke radio silence to signal Kakuta on Tinian. American direction-finding stations fixed the transmission around 350 miles west-southwest of Task Force 58. Mitcher asked permission to run west through the night and attack at dawn. Spruance refused. He believed the Japanese might split their fleet, pull the carriers west, and send a second force around behind them onto the invasion transports off Saipan. Task Force 58 turned east, back toward the beachhead. There was another thing working against him. The trade wind in the Marianas blew from the east. Both fleets had to turn into the wind to fly. For Ozawa, that meant turning toward the enemy. For Mitcher, it meant every launch and every recovery carried him further away. At dawn on the 19th, the sky was clear from horizon to horizon, visibility unlimited, the wind light. Around 5:30, a Zero out of Guam found the American carriers and reported them before it was shot down. Aircraft on Guam began taking off. 30 Hellcats from Belleau Wood arrived over Orote Field and caught them in the climb, and a running fight over the airfield destroyed about 35 Japanese aircraft. Then the Hellcats were called home. Radar had found something much larger coming in from the west. The battleship Alabama, out ahead in Lee's line, made the first contact well over 100 miles out. On the carriers, the fighter direction officers cleared the sky and sent up everything. Mitcher sat on Lexington's flag bridge in a swivel chair facing aft, in his long-billed cloth cap worn backwards, while the decks below him launched fighter after fighter. The first raid was 68 aircraft from the vanguard force. 70 miles out from the American ships, the Japanese formation stopped to circle and reform before its attack run. That pause gave the Hellcats time to climb above them. 41 of the 68 were shot down before a single Japanese pilot saw an American warship. Not one aircraft of the first wave reached the carriers. One dive bomber put a 500-pound bomb through the main deck of the battleship South Dakota at 10:49, killing 24 men and wounding 27. She held her place in formation. She was the most seriously damaged American ship of the entire battle. The second raid was the big one. More than 100 aircraft launched from Ozawa's own carriers. Radar picked it up shortly after 11. About 70 were shot down before they reached the ships. Bombs went into the water alongside Wasp and Bunker Hill. A torpedo scratched Indiana. Of that raid, roughly 97 aircraft did not come back. In a ready room aboard Lexington, a fighter pilot listening to the tallies said it was like an old-fashioned turkey shoot. Lieutenant Alexander Vrasu of VF-16 shot down 6 dive bombers in about 8 minutes using 360 rounds of ammunition and was photographed on Lexington's deck minutes after landing, canopy open, holding up 6 fingers. The third raid, 47 aircraft, mostly failed to find the American fleet at all and mostly survived because of it. The fourth, 82 aircraft, was sent to a position report that was wrong by more than 100 miles. They found empty ocean, ran low on fuel, and broke up. 49 of them headed for Guam. American fighters were waiting over Orote Field and shot down 30 in the landing pattern. The 19 that got down were wrecked beyond repair. While his aircraft were dying, Ozawa lost his flagship. At 8:20 that morning, the submarine Albacore, commanded by James Blanchard, fired 6 torpedoes at Tai-ho. A Japanese pilot who had just taken off from her deck, Warrant Officer Sakio Komatsu, saw the wakes and flew his aircraft into one of them. 4 more missed. 1 hit, forward on the starboard side. It jammed the forward elevator and cracked the aviation fuel tanks. Tai-ho kept flying operations at 26 knots. Her crew planked over the open elevator pit with timber so the deck could keep working. Petrol vapor built up below. A damage control officer ordered the ventilation system run at full and the elevator well open to the hangars, believing the fumes would clear. Instead, they spread through the whole ship. 6 hours after the torpedo hit, the vapor detonated. The armored flight deck, the feature that was supposed to make Tai-ho unsinkable, bulged upward. Both hangars burned out. Ozawa transferred to a destroyer, then to the cruiser Haguro. Tai-ho went down almost level, taking roughly 660 men and her captain with her. An hour and a half after Albacore's attack, the submarine Kavala, on her first war patrol under Herman Kostler, found Shokaku recovering aircraft. Kavala fired 6 torpedoes and hit with 3. Shokaku had launched the attack on Pearl Harbor. She burned for 2.5 hours, then a magazine let go. She rolled to port and went down bow first with her propellers turning in the air, and 4 heavy explosions came up from below after she was gone. 1,272 men died. Kavala took 106 depth charges and survived. By dark, Ozawa had lost 2 fleet carriers, and about 100 aircraft remained flyable out of 430. Task Force 58 had lost around 30 aircraft. No American ship had been sunk. On the cruiser Haguro, with a fraction of the communications he had enjoyed that morning, Ozawa worked out that his missing aircraft had flown on to Guam and Rota as the plan required, and could be gathered up and used again. He decided to refuel and renew the attack on the 21st. Instead of running west, he held his position. The next afternoon, Spruance released Mitcher to chase. American search planes found nothing all morning. At about 20 to 4, a search Avenger from Enterprise, flown by Lieutenant Robert Nelson, found the mobile fleet. The Japanese were at the outer edge of American range, and the position he reported turned out to be 60 miles short. Mitcher had about 75 minutes of daylight. He knew the strike would come home in the dark, over crews with no night landings in their logbooks, on a night with no moon. He said, "Launch them." At 24 minutes past 4, 11 carriers began launching. 240 aircraft went off the decks. Mitcher canceled the second strike. They attacked around 10 to 7 in failing light, roughly 300 miles out. 4 Avengers from Belleau Wood went in against the carrier Hio, led by Lieutenant George Brown, whose aircraft was already burning. He ordered his radio man and gunner to bail out and kept flying the attack. Hio took at least 1 torpedo, went dead in the water, and 2 hours later her leaking fuel vapor blew her apart. She sank with 250 men. Brown did not come back. Bombs hit Zuikaku, now Ozawa's flagship, and her crew briefly prepared to abandon ship. Junyo, Chiyoda, Ryoho, the battleship Haruna, and the cruiser Maya were all damaged. 2 fleet oilers had to be scuttled. Another 65 Japanese aircraft were destroyed. Then the Americans had to get home. Aircraft began ditching on the way back, out of fuel in the dark. At about 8:45, with the first of them overhead, Mitcher ordered the task force to turn on its lights. Flight deck lights, masthead lights, searchlights pointed straight up into the sky, destroyers firing star shells, with Japanese submarines known to be in the water. Around 209 aircraft reached the force. About 150 got aboard, many on the wrong carriers. The last was taken on at 11 o'clock. The rest went into the sea. Task Force 58 lost about 100 aircraft that night, roughly 80 of them to darkness and empty tanks. Destroyers combed the water for 2 days and pulled most of the crews out. 16 pilots and 33 aircrewmen were lost. Across the 2 days, Japan lost 3 carriers, 2 oilers, close to 600 aircraft, and 2,987 men. The Americans lost 123 aircraft and 109 men, and not a single ship. Ozawa anchored at Okinawa on the 22nd of June with about 35 aircraft still flyable. He submitted his resignation, and it was refused. Saipan fell on the 9th of July. Tinian and Guam followed. Kakuta died on Tinian as the island was overrun. The Tojo cabinet fell on the 18th of July, brought down by the loss of Saipan. And on the 24th of November, the first B-29 Cess took off from those islands for Tokyo. Japan built about 28,000 aircraft in 1944, more than in any other year of the war. What it could not build was pilots. In October, the first organized kamikaze units were formed. That same month, Ozawa took his carriers to sea again at Leyte Gulf, with barely 100 aircraft between 4 flight decks, and this time their assigned mission was to be seen. On the 25th of October, off Cape Engano, all 4 were sunk. The Imperial Japanese Navy never launched another carrier airstrike.